Welcome to the Smart Publishing Impact Series. I'm Renée Lautermilch, Chief Editor at Smart Publishing, and this is the podcast where we explore all things writing, publishing, and the impact of storytelling. In each episode, I'll share insights and strategies to help you navigate the book journey, whether you're writing, publishing, or already an author. Plus, you'll hear from inspiring authors who are using their book to change lives. And if you're passionate about storytelling and ready to make an impact, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. Now let's get started. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Smart Publishing Impact Series. I'm Renée Lautermilch, your host and chief editor at Smart Publishing. And today's episode is episode number 33. I am calling it The Writer's Block Antidote. And so, of course, it is all about preventing and staying away from experiencing writer's block, which is a very, very common thing that you hear in book writing. I think it's common across genres. I think it shows up a little bit more in fiction because there's a bit more of a creative process in fiction with, instead of just going from things that you know or research that you're writing off of where you have reference points, whether that's reference points in your own memory or reference points that you're using from your research. It is typically completely fabricated, made up, characters, world, unless you're basing it off of something, of course. So it's a little bit more common there, but it's something that writers across genres definitely experience. And I will say, at least within nonfiction and probably within fiction too itself, it is completely preventable. It's not something that you ever have to experience. So I myself, I've written a total of 4 books. 2 of them haven't been published yet. 2 have been published. And I have never experienced writer's block, not one single time. And we will, in a little bit after we get through defining what writer's block is and some of the symptoms, we will talk about why I've never experienced it. And it's not because I'm special. It's because I follow a specific process that is built to help you avoid it and help you write your book pretty rapidly. So let's talk about what it is. Writer's block, it's generally defined as the state of being unable to produce new writing, even when you want to or when you need to. So it's less about a lack of skill and more about a temporary disruption in the creative process. It's often described as people will often say, they sit down to write, but they feel stuck. Ideas don't flow, words feel forced, or nothing seems good enough to put on the page. I would argue that if that's the thought going through one's mind, then imposter syndrome is what is driving writer's block, not an actual disruption to the creative process itself. It can show up in different ways. So mental blankness, you can't think of what to write next. Overthinking, every idea feels inadequate, wrong before it's even written down. Avoidance, I see this a lot. You procrastinate or avoid writing altogether. Paralysis by pressure, the weight of deadlines or expectations makes it harder to start. So at its core, it's a psychological block rather than a literal loss of ability. And that's why it is completely preventable. It's a psychological thing. It's not because you've forgotten how to write, but something is disrupting your usual flow. Last week's episode was on imposter syndrome, episode 32. If you've not listened to that, go back and listen to it. If you are feeling like nothing is that you're putting out on the page is good enough, or there is some sort of level of pressure that is intimidating you, that's keeping you from moving forward, I would say if that's the case, your root issue is imposter syndrome. So go back and listen to episode 32 if you have not listened to it. Now let's talk about why it's completely preventable. I strongly believe that writer's block, aside from just being psychological, it is a product of improper preparation. So if you have prepared a strong enough outline to your book, or as I like to call what we do, a chapter map, then there's no reason you should ever get writer's block because you already have everything mapped out for every single chapter of your book. And it's just about sitting down and either writing or recording. Now, here's the thing, especially if you are recording, then this should really never happen to you because at that point, you've got your chapter map. You know what story you're going to tell, what principles you're going to share. You've outlined, each part of what you're going to share in the chapter. You just sit down with that and you talk it all out into a recording, like you're sharing your story and sharing some wisdom with someone over a cup of coffee. So, if you've never had an issue where you're sitting across with someone and you're like, I just don't know what to say, that typically doesn't happen, right? When we sit across from someone, we talk to someone, the words just flow. And so if you approach it in that way and you have properly prepared, then it's going to come out. And I would say that the next piece to that is that you cannot be worried about the output. The second you start worrying about the output, one, again, imposter syndrome is probably showing up. Over perfectionism is actually a symptom. It's a sign that you're experiencing imposter syndrome. So go back, listen to episode 32. Stop thinking about yourself in the process and start thinking about those who you're on a mission to help. Think about your mission. I really talk about how to overcome imposter syndrome in depth on that episode. So if you can benefit from that, definitely listen to it because there's a tried and true I don't want to call it technique, but really method or just mindset, really, for overcoming imposter syndrome to break through that. So a lot of the pressure gets taken off if you have the right editor too. So you should not, nobody should ever edit their own book. That's not a thing. Everybody needs an editor, whether you have somebody like me edit your book or you hire somebody off of Fiverr, or you've got a friend who's an English major and is just really good with grammar and line editing and things like that. Whatever, just you should not be your own editor. So if you're recording for audio transcription, that is something that you shouldn't have to worry about. You should just be able to hand over that transcribed chapter, hand it to your editor, and let them worry about sentence structure and flow, grammar, punctuation, structuring the whole chapter to flow together. Let them worry about that. That's not your job. Your job is to get your wisdom out, it's to get your stories out, it's to get the meat of what your book is about onto the page, whether the page is from an audio transcription or you're like me and you're literally typing, which I would say I kind of do a hybrid these days. If I'm telling a story or something I know well, I'll just talk it into a voice memo. But if I am, doing something that requires integrating research and things like that, I typically, sit down to type that out. So yeah, that's really the key here when we look at avoiding and overcoming writer's block. The key is proper preparation. So now writer's block is a possibility when you're preparing. So I would just say that if there is any one time in the entire writing process where it is important that you feel inspired and you feel motivated and you're coming to the page with ideas flowing, it is when you do your chapter map. Now, we have run into people who have really struggled with this before, and what tends to help with that is for them to have almost like a facilitator, somebody who is drawing their thoughts and ideas out of them, because some people, they just struggle with being able to do this on their own. So if you've come to sit down and do your chapter map multiple times and it's just not happening for you, you might look for someone who's a trusted friend, advisor, colleague who can sit with you and help you work out the details of your chapter map, help you work that out and help you figure out how to structure it. When when we meet with our authors the first time, those who've not yet written a manuscript, this is the first thing that we do. We facilitate the chapter map with them. So we sit down and we pull it out. We help to structure it. We refine it. We make sure that there's enough detail there so that by the time we walk away from that session, they have a very detailed chapter map that's going to serve as their North Star and guide them along the way. If you want to learn more about the chapter map, I have a free downloadable template for a chapter map that you can find on our website. You can find it at smartpublishingservices.com/resources. I also have 2 whole chapters in my book, The 1 Hour Author, that go through the chapter mapping process. So you can get my book on Kindle, hardcover, or paperback. It's actually also on Audible now. All of that on Amazon. The Kindle is like really cheap. $2.99, very very low barrier. That my book is just out there to help people. I'm not looking to become the next Stephen King off of my book, so I do not put a high price point on that. So that is out there and available to help you through the process. But when you do your chapter map, I will often tell authors, like, I'm cool with you spending like, maybe even 2 or 3 total weeks working on your chapter map. Spending almost the most amount of time there, because that is the foundation that your book will be built on. And so it is the most important thing that you do, honestly, in the writing process, because it's going to ensure that you have a cohesive book from start to finish that flows well. And it's going to ensure that you have all the information that you need to blow through each chapter, to really get through each chapter, because you've done the majority of the creative process and thought work um, before you ever started writing the book, by mapping out the book from start to finish. And so that difficult, creative, you know, very mentally exhausting work is already done. And from there, you're just telling your story, and you're spouting out your wisdom and having an editor help to shape it up. So yeah, that I would say is something that will completely help you avoid writer's block. I've done it with every single one of my books, and I've never experienced writer's block because I had a very detailed map that was leading me through the creation of my book step by step along the way. Um, the last thing I will say is I see authors who tend to try to go off script, once they have a chapter map in place. And then every time I see this, one of 2 things happens. One, they get completely lost, they get writer's block, and then they give up because they did not stick to the plan. This is why it's so important to get a solid plan with your chapter map and stick to it. Reference it and stick to it. That's how you get through your book. Every single time I see an author do that, they fly through their book, they get it done, they get it out, and it's a really good book because it paid attention to that 30,000-foot view, a cohesive book from start to finish. The other thing that I tend to see that happens is they veer so far off course because, like, let's just say the first 50% of the way through, they're following their chapter map and it's flowing and it's cohesive, it's good. And then they get this idea midway through, and now they're going out of left field. And now the book takes this other direction. And then they get to the end and they're like, oh, well, now we have to rework the whole first half of the book. Well, yeah, you do because you went off script. I strongly believe we all have more than one book in us. So if you're going through your chapter map and you feel that happening, discipline. Discipline. This is the self-discipline part. That's probably another book that you need to write. It's not the book that you're presently writing. This happened to me on my 3rd book, and that's why I have 4 books now with 2 that haven't been released. I was writing one book, had a really cool idea that just spurned and took my attention. Well, I created that into a completely separate book, but my first book, the premise is still, the premise is still there. Not my first book, technically my third book. The premise is still there. Now I'm going back and I'm doing that now that I've got this other book out of my system. So if you are going through your chapter map and you feel this like brilliant idea that comes up, where something you want to talk about or something you want to do differently, that is very likely another book. If it's just that you didn't like what you were doing to start with, then that's probably a sign that you rushed the chapter mapping process. Again, that's why I think it's so important to spend a good solid amount of time and feel really confident and really solid on your chapter map before you begin the book writing process. And that's it. That's all I have today. So, as always, if you're not connected with me, I'm on Facebook quite a bit, so hit me up there, Renée Lautermilch. I am the only Renée Lautermilch in the world, so when you search me, I am the only one who comes up. Really easy to find me. Add me. I always invite you to shoot me a DM with any questions or anything that you might have. Love talking to folks about writing. This is my whole world. Writing and publishing. Love it, love it, love it. Can't talk about it enough. If you've not already subscribed to this show, make sure that you hit that subscribe button. And, while you're at it, if you have 60 seconds, I would be so honored and appreciative if you would rate and review the show. It helps get this podcast out in front of more folks who could really use the educational content that's provided. And we have a lot more educational content on our website at smartpublishingservices.com. So that's another way that you can connect with us and reach out to us there, and also get some really great educational resources like the chapter map template that I spoke about earlier. So thank you so much for joining me on this episode this week. And until next time, avoid writer's block by creating a very solid chapter map, because the world needs your story. So you got to keep writing it, and you can't keep writing it if you have writer's block. Take care until next time.